All right, we're live. Hey guys, Frank with Tithely. I am joined today by Jillean Whittle from C3LA. Hey Jillean, how's it going?
So, great over here, Frank. In
It's
this,
going good over in
yeah,
LA?
yeah, changing all the time. And I mean, gosh, it's just crazy. I left my house for the first time in a long time yesterday and put on real clothes, and that was incredible.
So we've just for as folks are joining, we've been doing this show for this is week 5, so doing these kind of daily interviews. And it's been really cool. Like we go live in our Facebook group, onto our Facebook page, post it out onto our YouTube channels.
Cool.
And, we're just talking to church leaders and pastors who are doing church online, many who are doing it for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Most are at least learning how to do it better, even if they were doing it before. And so we did one last week on online small groups, and a bunch of the folks that work at Tithely, Dave and Sharon, and many others. But Dave was like, "Oh, you got to talk with Jillean. Like, you got to get her on the show. You got to talk small groups because she is brilliant and crushing it at C3LA." So yeah, we're going to talk about online small groups, and hopefully the folks that jump on get a ton out of this. I feel like every conversation that I have, there's always some little nugget that if people are watching and paying attention, they're going to be able to take that away and apply it to how they're doing church online, whether it's like live streaming or
Awesome.
small groups, or giving or anything like that. So I'm really excited, and chatting with you beforehand, I think you've got some great stuff to share. So super excited about today. So why don't you, if you're joining us on Facebook, give the show a like, say hi to Jillean. And Jillean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into ministry, how you got out to LA, all those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Canada, and
Nice.
yeah,
I did not pick up on that at all. Like there was no
yeah, I work hard.
Canadian.
I work hard at that for you not to pick up on that. The accent is. I love you, Canadians, and I'm still very much a Canadian. But yes, I worked hard on getting rid of that. I grew up in Canada, and going to church, God, it wasn't a part of our childhood. It wasn't part of how we were raised. And when I was about 21 years old, a very good friend of mine had been inviting me to a C3 church actually in Canada forever, like for a full year every Sunday. And I finally went. And I think the reason why I'm so passionate about small groups is because that was where I encountered God. I would go to this, they called them life groups there, and I would ask so many questions. I mean, I was bringing like textbooks on evolution and charts and graphs as to, why God couldn't possibly exist. And these incredible people just would pray with me, like they were out of answers. We'll just pray. And so shortly after, I really gave my life to Christ, I heard a sermon about dreams. And I realized I'd never dreamt before. I'd never dreamt about my future. I was just, in college studying, doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And something within me said, go to LA, and at the time I wouldn't have known that was God, but it was truly just a radical moment of shifting into sort of this new future. And so I packed my car up, I drove to LA, and had no idea what God would do. When I first got out here, I was taking acting classes and just doing, again, what I thought I was supposed to do, but landed in, a church out here and just started putting one foot in front of the other. And literally, as, my pastors would ask me, like, do you want to lead this hospitality team? I would say yes. Do you want to lead this small group? Yes. And then fast forward, a few years, and I'm sitting in my pastor's office, and he's asking me to come on staff and, kind of lead the charge for one of our locations, and then also for our small groups. And so it was really just, an act of saying yes every time God put something in front of me. And now here I am. And kind of like I told you earlier, it still blows my mind, like a decade later, that this is kind of where God has brought me and has redeemed so many parts of my story and my life in doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm just so grateful all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Such a cool. I know that's only a small part of the story there,
Yeah.
but so cool. And you know, like, you know, when Dave Fletcher was like, you got to talk to Jillean. She's like the small group queen. So you and your husband are location pastors for one of the
Yep.
locations at C3LA, and also it sounds like you kind of help, you know, run all of the small groups and dinner parties and hospitality and things like that for the church. Um, so yeah, I'm excited to talk about small groups in the age of coronavirus and
Yep.
church online. So tell us a little bit about, you know, how you guys do small groups and how you've transitioned into doing them completely online for, you know, at least 8 weeks and probably
Yep.
more.
Yep. Yeah. So our small groups, we go off of a free market system, which is, I think it's an ARC model, but we allow our small group leaders to kind of choose what group they want to lead. And we were doing our groups every other week. This is kind of years ago. We were doing our groups every other week. And
Yeah.
We took our leaders kind of through the change of like, we need to offer consistent community to people, you know. Small groups should be a part of the rhythm of people's faith life, you know,
Yeah.
instead of just this thing that I go to and I need to look at the calendar to make sure it's an on week or an off week. And so I think a huge change that we made that got us ready for this season that we're in right now is that we just decided, you know, whether this is going to be a difficult change or not, we're taking our small groups to meeting every single week. And we're going to provide that consistency to the people of Los Angeles. And so I think there are so many things that got us ready for this moment. I think the amount of focus that we put on we call them neighborhood groups, the amount of, intention and passion that we put behind them got us to a place where, you know, the week that sort of COVID really hit and all of a sudden, you know, we have a girl in our church, her father works for the CDC. And so we were kind of getting little bits of information. And I was talking to her like at one point, like every 6 hours, like to get the update on what was going on.
Real time.
But we were able to transition all of our groups to either, you know, they meet on Zoom mostly. It seems to be the most effective platform for them, or Google Hangouts. We were able to transition our groups overnight to meet online. We saw, you know, that first week of COVID, we saw the greatest attendance that we've ever seen, like in the history of neighborhood groups at C3LA, which was really powerful. And I think something that I'm just realizing now is we've never shied away from change in our small group system. Like if we've noticed something is a little bit off or not working, we've never shied away from that. And so in doing that, we taught our leaders to not be fearful of leading through change. And so when all of a sudden we had to change things to the online platform, they just led fearlessly through that, you know, and passionately. And something that was really important for us in the beginning was communication around it, you know, obviously. And I think sometimes, you know, we just have to remember, like when we make decisions, in order for them to translate to our people, we have to over communicate and communicate like above and beyond the why.
Right.
And obviously, you know, the why here wasn't too hard to explain, but we did set up many different calls with, you know, we have a few different layers of leadership within our small groups. So underneath the group's pastor, we also have group directors, and those operate sort of as like the boss in each of our locations, right? Because I can't be in each location. But then we also have a layer underneath the directors, neighborhood group coaches. And then we have our group leaders. And so, you know, it's layered leadership so that everyone is cared for, but that also helps with the communication. And so I think we had 3 different, you know, Zoom calls for them to log on, hear what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're going to effectively do it. And then we actually get our group leads together on a phone call, a Zoom call with me every Monday morning. And that's for, you know, us to just have another touch point with them, to inspire them. You know, like you kind of mentioned earlier, the Zoom platform can kind of suck for small groups, you know, and it is a challenge. And so that's something that, you know, we really wanted to invest our time into. And so for 30 minutes on Monday morning, we either, you know, I'll bring a teaching or an inspiration, or we'll have someone else on and do a little Q&A. We try to keep it really fresh. And then we pray over our group leaders. And we're just seeing the impact of that has been huge in strengthening them, so that they don't sort of lose focus and they don't lose, any momentum in this season.
I mean, it sounds like really smart, just in terms of you jumped into this time, weren't afraid to change, all the kind of stuff that you guys were already equipped and kind of ready for, in a sense, without knowing it was coming.
Yeah.
But then communication and training for the small group leaders got kicked into place. And I think that's really smart, really important to kind of help equip the people who are leading a small group who may not know how to use Zoom or what Zoom is or how to do any of the things well in this environment that is totally different than doing it in your home. So I hope people kind of pick up on that. If you haven't done training for your small group leaders, do some training. Even 8 weeks in, we're still going to be here for a while. So jump in and start providing some resources. Yeah.
And we used to do these big elaborate trainings at the end of a season. We would do these huge events, and we would do worship, and we'd bring in a guest speaker, and then we would do breakout sessions and train our new group leaders who were entering in. We'd throw a party basically. And while it was so fun, we did our first neighborhood group training on the Zoom platform a couple of weeks ago, and it was amazing because we had one-on-one time with the people for them to ask questions in the chat, and then us to respond in that way. And it was just so different. And it was this light bulb moment for us. Oh my gosh, we've been putting on these gigantic events that, take up people's time and, finance, and we could have been just doing it through a Zoom platform, so that was a huge learning for us.
Well, in terms of training in this, because I want to get into some of the actually hosting a small group and what you guys are learning and all that. But before we jump there, in terms of training, what have you found to be most useful? In the kind of we're training for the online world, what are people really latching on to from the leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think I would say right now it's hard for the leaders, or it was hard in the beginning, for them to be as passionate about the digital space as they were about in person. Because, they're inviting their friends into their home, they're cooking a meal for them, they're hugging them, they're praying with them and being able to see them encounter God in real time. And so I think maybe this isn't necessarily training, but it's just that what we've brought forward to them has been largely inspiration-based and story-based. And so, the first week of online church, we had a girl watching and interacting in the chat room, saying that she was looking for a church in Los Angeles. She lives, in the Valley. And so right away, we got her connected to neighborhood group leaders in the Valley. They had her on their Zoom platform that week. And she had actually never said yes to Jesus. And so then one of the small group leaders got on a call with her the following week and led her to Christ. And if we don't tell that story to every single small group leader that we have in our church, we've missed something entirely, And so I think that the training is important as far as the practical tips and all of that. But I think the biggest thing for us right now in this time is keeping people inspired and just keeping them motivated to keep reaching people. This isn't a pause moment for the church. This isn't a pause moment to, not invite people to church, not invite people to your small group. It's kind of easier than ever before, and so we've just been encouraging, think outside the box. This stuff is changing people's lives, whether we're in person or not.
No, so good. I mean, it's easy and maybe human nature to some extent to sort of retreat, to pause, to take a break, to relax or whatever. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. Telling those stories of impact and how you're reaching people in this environment is a big deal. Let's shift just because we try not to make these go too long and want to be respectful of your time, but in the actual hosting of a small group, doing it digitally, how are you guys doing it? What are you guys seeing working? What's not working? Let's just jump into that for a little bit.
Yeah, we're loving Zoom. I think Zoom is probably the best platform
Yep.
for your small groups. If you can, depending on how many small groups you have, the 40-minute time frame that they offer for free is, in my opinion, not enough time.
Right.
But something that we've definitely communicated to our group leads is that whereas you would have dinner in a home and, you could hang out for 2 hours in person and probably the time flies by, that's not necessarily the case on the digital space. And so
Right.
while we say 40 minutes is not long enough, an hour and a half is kind of this sweet spot that we've hit. And I think, if the church can, pay for one platform and add a few users or whatever it looks like, I would encourage you to do that, because I think Zoom's functionality is just perfect for small groups. But one
It's
thing,
so easy. It's so easy. So we use it. We use Zoom as well.
I think, one thing that's really important, I was telling Frank this story, but the first week of some of our dinner parties, our group leaders were encouraging people like, make dinner and, let's all eat dinner together on Zoom. And it was so
this
awkward.
Goes in the small group fail category, but it's such a good point, because I think the way you described is like people try to recreate what they're doing in their home and they do it on Zoom and they think it's going to work. But oftentimes it actually doesn't work. It's not the same. It's a different medium. So you've got to figure out how to do it well in this environment. So I love your story. Sorry to jump in, but just to go, like, you can't just recreate what you were doing. Because it's different. So anyways.
And I think something really important, and I'm sure everyone watching has maybe experienced this by this point, but when you first log into a Zoom, if there's not one person like commanding the room, it's awkward, right? So whatever meeting you're leading on Zoom, I would just really recommend being intentional enough to pick one person who's good at just bantering, or the icebreaker. I hated icebreakers going into this and like refused to bring that forward to our small group leaders as an option. But now this is something that we're truly finding is doing what it's called, breaking the ice. And so I think equipping your group leads with some really great icebreakers just breaks the awkwardness right off the beginning. And I think if you can break the awkwardness off the beginning, when you move into discussion and prayer, that same tone will be carried through. Use the chat, like all of these platforms have chat. And so that's something that we've been finding has been really effective. Like if our group leader is teaching on like how to have peace in this season, we encourage them to say, like, if that's you, if you're struggling to have peace in this season, just say a little me in the chat so we can pray with you later. Which has been really effective, because some people who aren't necessarily bold enough to speak up in neighborhood groups or small groups are able to, type a little something in the chat.
Like use the chat. Feel more comfortable, using chat and not saying it out loud in front of everyone.
And we've just encouraged our group leaders to dive into discussion and teaching and prayer sort of right off the bat, right after the icebreaker. Don't try to make it be some like 30-minute hang like you normally would, just dive right in. We've encouraged them to stop talking about COVID. I think the first few weeks you're like, how's everyone doing in this? And that's important, but if we're not just these social gatherings, like we're bringing people together around the truth of the word, right? And so we've encouraged our group leaders to put together these little mini messages and, research the scriptures and dig into commentaries. And so we're actually finding, I felt like at the beginning of this whole season, God was really speaking to me about kind of uncovering like teachers within our community and people who can craft the word of God together in a really profound way. And so we just gave them that charge, like stop talking about COVID and put together these little like 5 to 10 minute messages with really strong discussion questions, and then, launch your group into discussion.
And go. I love, so take a few steps back. So I think the first thing you said is have a host. And, I think in terms of a really practical thing to do, like outside of using Zoom, having an actual host. So what does a good host do in a Zoom setting?
Well, I've like self-titled me as the Zoom banter queen. I think it's just somebody who can like, not feel awkward if it is awkward, and somebody who can just be confident. It kind of is like the host of the physical gathering, right? When somebody walks into your home, you don't just like shrink back into your kitchen. You go to the door and you greet them. And
Right.
so
You answer the door. Yeah. You greet
yeah,
them, give them a hug, say hi to the kids,
yeah.
like that whole moment.
We've had this like incredible thing that, you know, people who have had to move out of LA back home during this time, or people who have moved away from our church but maybe haven't landed in a church in their new city, are signing into neighborhood groups, and because they can now, you know. And so something that the host has to do is, if somebody's new on the Zoom, you can't just leave them unmentioned, you know, because that's awkward for them, and it's awkward for everyone else who's looking around the Zoom going, I don't know that person. And so that's something that we really encourage our leaders to do, is like call out the new person in the room, give like a little backstory. You know, we have this new couple who just came to church on like the last week of us meeting in person, and they've been in neighborhood groups online, which is amazing. And so when they first signed on, I told like a little story. This is, you know, this is how I met them, and this is what she does for a living. And I think it's somebody who can just bring context to the beginning of the meeting as people are signing on. If somebody's got kids, like, hi, Luigi, or hi, you know, hi, so-and-so, how's homeschooling going? Oh my gosh, you guys are incredible. And, you know, banter really is.
Yeah. Welcoming people, creating some conversation, bantering a little bit, like making it comfortable in a lot of ways. Right.
Yep.
So I love that. So have a host, and then you went into Icebreakers.
Yep.
So give me your best icebreaker and your worst icebreaker.
Oh my gosh. If there's anybody, watching from C3LA, just forgive me, but the prior week, somebody in our group had suggested that we do the following week the icebreaker of telling your first kiss story.
Okay.
And I had all week to process this and think about it. And even literally
like, how is this going to go?
Say to me, I don't think this is a good idea, like multiple times. And I'm thinking of my first kiss story as like so innocent. And so we did it, and it was horrible. Like, it got so, you know, because we're in Los Angeles, like we had people on our neighborhood group, like barely recently came to Jesus, you know, like we're hearing stories like, oh gosh, I can't even repeat, like, and it was just this moment of like feeling the Zoom like slip away from you. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm so aware there's like 4 new people who just started coming to our church on this. And I finally kind of cut off the icebreaker, you know, because it was going too long. Don't let your icebreakers go long, because that's just a tragedy. Make them snappy. But towards the end of the icebreaker, I acknowledged one of the newer couples and said, did you guys want to like add your story of first kiss? And they both just went,
nah.
No. So
don't talk about awkward moments.
Don't
that one.
Do that. But hey, if you do have an awkward moment, just follow up with the people next day, up with that couple and said like, so sorry, it was a pause, and they were fine. Came back the next week. I think that I've had art to do with food. Like, everybody has such a common interest, and especially in a city like LA, people love to talk about food. So we had a group on Cinco de Mayo, and we said, what's your favorite taco spot in LA? My personal favorite is favorite road trip snack for an icebreaker, but anything around food is always really helpful. And like I mentioned to you, we have a girl in our church who works for Apple. And so we just reached out to her. Like, obviously, I'm sure they're crushing the digital platform, right? And they're hosting probably dynamic meetings. And so we just reached out to her and said, do you have any icebreakers? And she sent me this entire list of icebreakers. So
good. And I think it was like getting choppy for a second. So you're talking like icebreakers around food, like share your favorite food or anything like that is a great, like, easy for everybody. Everyone can participate. Yeah, love that.
Common interest.
Are you common interest. Are you eating on these meetings at all? Is it like banning eating because it can be weird, or are you like, hey, no,
you can totally eat on the meeting. I think it's just to say, basically, I think what we were trying to do in the beginning was reproduce something that was happening in person.
Right.
You know, and you just can't. That's an element of our small groups that you just won't be able to reproduce in the digital setting. And so, for sure, if people want to eat, I think typically, you know, we have morning groups and that met at coffee shops, and so they'll all make their morning cup of coffee and sit and drink it together. But that's a little bit more natural, you know. Yeah,
absolutely. What so just kind of in wrapping up, it's just about 9:30 here out on the West Coast. So how are you guys thinking about sort of going back and maybe leveraging or learning from some of the things that have happened in this season, and how do you think they'll translate back to, you know, when we're having small groups in people's homes?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and something that, you know, we're still, I feel like we learn something new every single week, but I think just the learn of being, how easy it is to bring together the whole team. So like the whole groups team. So our directors, our coaches, our group leads on Zoom phone calls to, you know, inspire them or culturally impart something to them. That will never go away. That's, you know, so important. And then I think the other biggest thing, I remember probably like 4 years ago, we have a guy who works in for T-Mobile corporate, and he's actually a neighborhood group coach, and he came to us and said we should offer an online platform for our small groups, like for people who are commuting to work an hour and a half and then commuting home an hour and a half. They're never going to be able to go to, and we were like, that sounds crazy. I don't think we're going to do that, you know?
Right.
And now we're learning, like, we're in a commuter city and we're seeing people who have never been able to go to groups, able to go to groups. And so something that we're definitely going to offer in the new, you know, in the new normal, whatever it is an online platform for groups. And so we're actually just
like actually have online small groups that continue on for cases like that, where people are commuting or whatever the situation is, but like there is actually an online or a handful of online small groups that are always going on. That's cool.
And I think it's important to keep in mind, like nothing will ever be better than you being in person, you know, with these people in this setting. However, if you can make it accessible, depending on the city you're in, we would just be remiss to not have learned that lesson, you know? And so we're even playing around with experimenting with our in-person groups once we can, also offering a digital sort of login option for when the discussion starts. So they would log in sort of after the dinner party element of it. They'd log in after sort of like the small talking conversation. And then, you know, we would have partial in-person discussion, but also people on a Zoom platform. And then some of our groups, like our morning groups for the commuters, we're going to allow to just be fully digital, which I'm really excited about. You know, I think, like I mentioned, we've just seen people that we haven't seen in groups in either forever or so long, or that, you know, unfortunately they've had to move back home with family during this time. We've still been able to engage them. And so I don't want to lose that when we get back to in person, but yeah,
that's so good. Well, we could keep chatting because I think there's a lot here to unpack. And if you're watching us live or if you catch the recording, I hope you pulled out a few tips. Hosts and icebreakers, I think, are very practical things that you guys can all put into practice now. And Jillean, it's been great to have you. Thanks for spending half an hour with us today and sharing what you guys are learning at C3LA with the rest of the world of churches that we interact with.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, have a great day. We'll catch you tomorrow. And Jillean, we'll see you around, I'm sure. Say hi to the whole crew over there next time you see
I will, for sure. Thanks, Frank.
All right. See ya.